have a little bit of time for a Q&A, and in order to include the most questions possible, I would invite you at this time to come forward and really ask a question. If there isn't a question mark at the end of your sentence, don't say anything. Thank you. Okay, the mics are open for Q&A. I'm going to take the privilege of the first. Betty, what's the Alabama miracle?
Flipping the seat. Is it on?
Yes.
Flipping to the seat to the Democrats was the consequence of the votes of black women in Alabama.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Tom Lyon from a group called Building Bridges in Brookhaven and United Church of Christ. I've been reading a lot about the insistence of the campaign to say we are not political. And I think in the context of what's being said today, we need to clarify that so we're all speaking in the same way about that. Because it's very confusing, I think, at this point, to politicians even, that want to jump on board. So maybe you could address that. Thanks.
I most certainly can. So I think in this country also, part of what we've mistaken is political action to mean electoral politics. And I think it's important to understand that every action we take is political, even if we are faith-based. And in my experience, working within the church, I am also UCC. There is nothing more, can folks hear me? Yes. There is nothing more political than church. And so what we are saying as a campaign is that we are non-partisan. We are not here for funneling people into the Democratic or the Republican Party. That's not what we're here for. But we're here to build a political consciousness of folks grounded in morality and faith and what we are capable of doing politically as a force, focused in advancing the struggles of those who are poor and dispossessed. There are other folks in the room that are also part of the campaign who can, if you have more questions in relation to that, share more of an analysis. But the basis of our understanding in terms of politics is that we're non-partisan. And so in our spaces, we are not allowing politicians to come in and take over and say we are part of this, because ultimately they have been for too long part of the problem.
Good morning. Roberta Todd, Anti-Racism Committee of the Diocese, the New York Episcopal Diocese. But my question has to do with your comment about control of dissent or protests. And I go back to David Billings' book, and he spent time talking about after '68, after the civil rights had peaked, how the anti-poverty programs kind of controlled why you have to take up the mantle again. But I wanted you to expand a little bit more about control of consent.
So it would be control of dissent?
Dissent.
Yes. And I feel like when I said that, I meant to say that, I have an example. So we are allowed to protest and have a May Day rally for as long as we're corralled and heavily policed. And so if we are not given a permit, we're not allowed to voice our dissent. And that's what I mean. So they create conditions that move our very human need to dissent, and then they control what that dissent looks like. And it's either corralled and control, and then if it's chaotic, because they've taught us how to be chaotic and violent, then we're criminalized for it. And that's what I mean. That either way, it's controlled by those who have economic, social, and economic dominance over the many.
Thank you, all of you. My name is Catherine Skopik, and I'm a member of both sacred and secular groups. Sacred being the Interfaith Moral Action on Climate, secular being Sierra Club, People's Climate Movement, and so forth. Betty, I took a course with you in 1985. My question is this. In the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., how do we keep our eyes on the prize? Those conversations with the community that you talked about, and overcoming our differences. For example, how to bring in those who are privileged but the underprivileged, to dissolve those differences and our political difference of age and so forth. So how do we dissolve those differences or ease the conversations within our communities so that we are able to keep our eyes on the prize? Thank you.
I've taken two. I don't presume to have all the answers because I don't. But I think it's a long process. We've also been taught that things happen in an instant. And a lot of the times we become impatient in the process. And I think folks that have, again, practiced and sacrificed their lives in engaging and taking on nonviolent direct action have taught us how that looks. For the campaign, we've casted a broad and wide net. And there are people from all socioeconomic backgrounds that are part of the campaign. Very different political experiences that are willing to be in conversation with each other because we understand that our very lives, right? The interconnection of the lives of those who are more impacted and those who may have several privileges are still connected. And so a lot of it has to be part of dialoguing and conversation and having the willingness and the ability to sit through uncomfortable conversations. Again, we've been taught to, and I speak for myself, to dismiss and dispose of people. And what we are advocating and what we are saying, even in the conversations between organizers that are coming from New York City to New York, like the other parts, right, of New York State, because we are that arrogant, right? I have to say it is true. I mean, I at some point also organized in that way. The most important things happen in New York City. Nothing else, and it's that arrogance that doesn't allow for true, genuine dialogue and connection of people, right? And in living in New York City, born and raised, it took me 35 years to go to the southern tier and meet poor white people. And when they spoke, I was like, oh my God, you might as well live in the Bronx. Right? And in this whole process, also finding folks that have a higher socioeconomic status that are saying, use us. Because we are not your allies, but your brothers and sisters in this struggle. And so it has to be that folks that are like-minded and committed to change the systematic problems of this country come together, be in conversation, acknowledge each other, touch each other, and say, you are my brother, you are my sister. We need to work through whatever issues we have, love each other unconditionally, and move forward because our lives depend on it. And that's all I can say to that.
I wanted to comment on that as well, and particularly in light of the last part of your comment. I think one of the most important things we can do in opening ourselves to connection is to think of every encounter with a person we have not known as an opportunity for deepening our own humanity, and by so doing making ourselves stronger and the others stronger. Another very empowering concept for those of us who are in long-term struggles to keep our eyes on the prize is something that Elise Boulding, I don't know if she ever wrote it, but I heard her talk about it several times. She's a foundational peace researcher. And she said the present is actually 100 years. And she illustrated that by the way movements move. But it occurred to me that if the present is 100 years, then in each person there are 200 years of possibility. Because we have those who came before us and all we learned from them. We have our own experience and what that has taught us. And we have the hope and the possibilities of those whom we are interacting who will live beyond us. And I think, in a sense, we do that now in that we are enacting what we were taught by Dr. King.
My question might be a follow-up on that. First, Claudia, then Dr. Reardon, and combine. Claudia, I think you used a phrase, unity and community. And I realized when I wrote it down on my notepad, I wrote unity beyond community. And my thinking when I wrote it down was that as I look at the Poor People's Campaign, at least from the small interactions I've had with thus far, it feels very Christian. And it looks very Christian, and it sounds very Christian. And when I think about Dr. Reardon's comments about power, my experience with movements are that they are become more powerful as they expand beyond our unique communities that we live in. So I wonder what plans there are for the Poor People's Campaign to really reflect that unity beyond community from an interfaith perspective, and how, Dr. Reardon, you might see the power in that.
Thank you. I appreciate the unity beyond community, and making folks that are outside of our immediate communities part of the larger community, and that's what I meant. I think from the Poor People's Campaign, one of the things that we also need to acknowledge is that we are bringing art networks and people into the fold, into community. And although it may seem, and I would have to agree, that is foundationally very much Christian, we are making an effort of bringing folks from faith traditions, from the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Buddhist communities, even faith traditions that are not institutionalized, right? Because those traditions are faith traditions as well. When I say those traditions, I mean those folks that are practicing Yoruba, native indigenous folks that have their faith tradition that is ancestral, that need to be acknowledged. And what I would ask is folks that are here, that are able to bring those communities into the campaign, I'm making the call, help us do it. Because the idea of this campaign is not that the people that are in the campaign are going to do all the work. No. We need as many bodies, minds and hearts and feet and songs, making this community a larger one. And so we have folks that are not necessarily Christian that are part of the steering committees, folks at the state levels that are also helping us widen this sense of community. Do we need more folks in the fold? Yes, we do. And so if you have any ideas and thoughts on how we could do that better, you are more than welcome to speak to any of us, because we do need that support.
We have 5 more minutes, so I'd like to take 3 questions at once, if that's okay. Oh, yes, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I'll be brief. All issues that we are dealing with are centered on who has power and who has the right to power. I recently did a critique of the Sustainable Development Goals that are much celebrated with good reason. But my main critique was that I held them to be actually unachievable, not only in the 15 years, but ever, because they did not confront the power structure in which all of these economic injustices and the causes of poverty take place. And what is important about the People's Campaign is here we have the opportunity to do something about power, which is about the management of resources and possibilities. And we need to extend it beyond the faith-based communities. There has to be a strong outreach to secular people who are motivated to work for justice as well.
If we could just take quick 3 in successions.
Sure. I just wanted to refer back to this control of dissent concept. And one of the ways in which I see that happening is for people to sort of try to control people's anger. In the communities, they have a right to experience and feel that anger. And so my question is, how would this initiative plan to hold, allow space, help people care for that anger and not repress it or try to, minimize it or just, sort of push it away altogether?
I love and appreciate the question. We're taking 3 more? Yeah, 2 more.
Great question.
Yeah.
Leo Bierman from Brooklyn Center for Sacred Activism. I'm deeply excited for this campaign for more revival, and I will see you in Albany. And my main question is, what does success in this campaign look like? What do we want to actually see happen as a result of our actions? Because I think that's important to inspire us. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Barrett Ullman with, I'm a member of JFREG and TRUA. My question's also a follow-up on the dissent issue, and I guess what I'm wondering is about, if you can comment on the dangers of participating in this controlled dissent. So for example, when there is a permit protest and people listen to the police and get on the sidewalk as opposed to not, or in other kinds of progressive movements are participating with the systems. And I ask this from a very personal place because I teach for the Bard Prison Initiative, and in a way we are allies with the correctional institutions because we're trying to teach there. We have to maintain relationships, but at the same time we are trying to undermine the way it operates, and that tension between those 2 things is something I grapple with.
Hey, Reverend Luis Alfredo Parker, Arabian Christian Church and Michael Faith Table. My question is, how do we get Puerto Rico on the national agenda? Most people believe that we belong to, but we are not part of the United States. And how do we mobilize the majority of the Puerto Rican people who now do not live on the island, but live in the United States, forced out, not just because of economic, not because of Irma, not just, and Maria, how do we get them mobilized so that we can incorporate them as part of this nation? And like yourself, I was born and raised in that beautiful, largest city of Puerto Rico, the South Bronx.
Okay, my math is never very good, but I think that was 4 questions rather than 3, so I am going to now let the folks here address them.
I love it. It's definitely a Caribbean island.
Okay, all right, sorry, I've just been told, do you have can you put it in the sentence, your question? Just 1 sentence?
I think you would like me. I'm a great guy. I want to say, let's give a hand, Cruz, Reverend Cruz, a hand. Let's give her a hand. You're speaking with a voice. I'm a humanitarian artist. I have many accolades. But I trained myself from 14 for the last 25 years since my brother was murdered, giving his life for humanity and gun violence. And standing in the midst of looking how, Reverend Cruz, how we construct and bring the musicians together. That's my lane. And so what I like to do is challenge the world along with Cruz. I love you, Mother. We show you as an intergenerational gap between the young and the elders. There's a village. And that's what we need. Last year, for the last 20 years, I've been putting on interfaith And I'm glad to be here amongst every last one of y'all. Hope to get your cards so y'all can join me and cruise out. I'm in the Bronx doing a lot of things in the Bronx. I want you and I this month at the United Nations. I wear a new hat, appointed this month. In February, I was appointed as the new advisor to the Secretary General of El Salvador. And because of my experience as a child. So in least last, what I'm just saying is this, because it's so important what Cruz is saying. Because the battle was hard for me, and I don't want it hard for her, and we're going to make it happen. Cruz, this month at the United Nations, they named it Hip Hop Month all across the world. So let's get together and let's make it happen. Let's take all these folks and let them help us, all right? Love you. God bless America.
Thank you much, brother. All right, so there's 4.5 questions. All right, so the sister whose name I don't know, but I love your shirt, Black Women Lead. What is that? Hashtag. I think it's important to, yes, we need to acknowledge and validate and affirm righteous anger. Like, if we are not angry from everything that has been shared, or that at least I shared in terms of statistics today, like, there's something really wrong with us. Like, if we become so complacent and normalize the levels of poverty, the levels of crime against humanity, then there's something really wrong with us. So yes, we have to validate that. And yes, we have to affirm it. And at the same time, we need to consciously think about a response, not a reaction. So I think the question is, what are the spaces that are we creating for that type of reflection? And I think one of the things that I value around the Poor People's Campaign is the creation of community, right? Where folks that are experiencing these very harsh realities are talking with each other. Because one of the things that the system also does is isolate us from each other. We can't touch each other. We can't see each other in our faces and say we are experiencing the same thing, and we have the same anger, and we have the same pain. So creating a space for that type of reflection is important, because it allows also a space to strategize as a response. And I feel like as folks of faith in this space, the church should be that space. The temple should be that space. The mosque should be that space. Not to pacify people. No, but to redirect that energy. And so I think that's the call today, not to invalidate the need for self-defense, because non-violent direct action is not a call for that. No. It's how do we understand self-defense and self-preservation in the practice of nonviolence.
Betty, and then success. We want to also get to that, and then we need to wrap it up in a minute.
I'd like to respond to the question of what it looks like when we get there, and also to the issue of Puerto Rico. One of the devices that we have used for a long time in peace education is asking learners to envision a world that they would want to live in. And then you come back and say, well, what are the obstacles to that? Why isn't it like that? And what do we do to overcome them? How do we get from here to there? And it is in the getting from here to there that we need to have political education and strategic education. And I think what the Poor People's Campaign is about now is getting from here to there. But I think we all can work a little bit more on the specific institutional changes and how we might move toward them. I am very happy that you raised the issue of Puerto Rico, because there is another evil that still exists and we overlook it, and it is colonialism. And Puerto Rico has been and is a colony of the United States mainland. and has been treated as such. And as you know, the purpose of a colony is to serve the mainland, to serve whoever has occupied it. There are many things that we can do right now. One is every one of you can contact your congressperson about a number of issues. The one that I am most concerned about, because I see it as an endeavor to maintain the colonial status, and that is education in Puerto Rico is DeVos on steroids. They are closing 1/4 of the schools, and not one politician has responded to that. That's happening. People are getting notices, don't come to school on Friday, don't come to school on Monday. I feel, as you can see, very strongly about that. But I think it's one thing we can do. The other thing, of course, is to repeal the Jones Act, which is the law of colonialism. But we can respond, and we should respond. I think it's our responsibility, and some of us are going to do a teaching in the fall on Puerto Rico, and if you're interested, you can send me an email, and I'll put you on the list to get a notice. Thank you.
I think we're going to have to. I have some thoughts. So, I have some thoughts, just some. But I'd like to respond to, yes, the question around Puerto Rico, and also the question about success. I think that in the process of redefining things, we also need to redefine what success looks like. This campaign is a multi-year campaign. And in this first phase, if we're able to get the leadership from both the faith communities and secular communities that are not speaking for the poor, but are being led and are being moved by poor people, if we could get these folks to engage in an organized, disciplined, and coordinated effort of 40 days of resistance, that's a win. We have won already. The fact that we have hundreds of people thinking and working for the campaign voluntarily, it's a win. In a climate where we're told that in order to be an organizer, you need to get a job as an organizer. People are donating their time and donating their resources even to make this campaign happen. Very few people in the campaign are staffed, okay? And we're talking about hundreds of people throughout the United States that wake up every day thinking and working for the campaign. And so the spirit of voluntarism, our redefinition of what politics mean, that is a success. We are talking about shifting the narrative around poor and poverty and being able to speak with communities that are able to say, we are no longer ashamed of being poor because it is not our shame to carry. That's a success. And so we need to, look at where we want to go and find out what the steps are. And in this first step, we're winning, And so that's my response to that. And then the question with regards to Puerto Rico, I think that as the New York State, we have the possibility of bringing forth the issue of Puerto Rico as we organize in Albany, as we organize in New York City. This campaign is state-based. The last portion of this campaign in terms of organizing for the 40 days were national partners. And I'll share why. Because they too are arrogant. Just like New York City is arrogant about the rest of, there's the understanding, and I say that not in a bad way to make our national partners feel in any way, but it's been shared that this was the last portion of the 40 days because we understand that a lot of the times when we talk about these issues and these struggles, the national partners, the national organizations are the ones leading, are the ones getting the press, are the ones getting the voice heard. And the states where most of these repressive policies are passed are not being heard. And so what we're saying is that the states are the ones that are lifting up what the demands and the platforms and how this campaign will be shaped. And so there is definitely more power in the state leadership process that there is at the national level with the organizations that are partnering with us. And I say that to say that as a state, we have the power, and Joe, you can just make if I'm going over my head here, but I think as a state, we could have conversations within the 6 weeks of resistance where Puerto Rico could be made, and it should be made, one of the pressing points that we push forward. And so we could talk a little bit more on how that could be done.
Great. I think that, thank you. This is a great point. Strategy is what this meeting is all about, so I hope you do talk more about this and we get some direction for the, you have now 5 minutes to get a cup of coffee and be back to your seats.